I remember well the evening when everything fell apart. Laura stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom, beautiful and smiling, taking her time getting dressed to go out. I stood in the doorway, hidden from her view, watching her life. She did it with almost spoken confidence, changing into modest underwear, fastening shiny black stockings to her waistband with the confidence born of practice. Her hair was penciled in, each stroke of the brush bringing her closer to the face she had many years ago, and that turned me on so much. She combed her hair with the same care, letting it flow in waves over the curves of her shoulders. And the dress, delicate, form-fitting, sexy, and flirty, and the high-heeled shoes that made her almost as tall as me. Of course, I had seen Laura getting ready for school before, but never like this. Never like this. It wasn't how beautiful she was. It was the embodiment of temptation. My heart was beating not with admiration, but with confusion. And then I realized she wasn't getting ready for me. She was getting ready for someone else. David Blake. His name was stuck in my mind. Her boss. I had seen them at the office before, at all the office parties. He was respectful, confident, and overly polite to Laura. I saw the way he looked at her at one of the office parties a few months ago with a smirk on his lips, as if he was in on some joke I wasn't privy to. The way he leaned in to whisper something in her ear, the way she laughed too easily. It all came together. The next few days were a struggle of suspicion, betrayal, and jealousy. I was losing my wife, and she was losing me. My only confidant, Laura, was now a stranger who had turned her back on me. I couldn't even bring myself to approach her. If she was unfaithful, I still wouldn't know. If she was honest, I didn't even know what to do. So I decided to find out for myself. I installed a whole network of surveillance devices in the house. Tiny, invisible cameras and microphones that transmitted information to an external server that I could access via the internet. The bedroom, the living room, even the front door. I justified it to myself by saying that I needed to know whether she was lying to me or not, and that my conscience would be clear. But in reality, I think I was afraid of what I would find. Soon, my worst fears were confirmed. I was in town on business and got stuck with the tape during a layover, unable to leave. But as I kept the door from closing on David, smiling at him in greeting, I felt my stomach twist. They were laughing, drinking wine, hugging on the couch. Then she pulled him into the bedroom, the very one we had lived in all these years. My chest hurt. It felt like the world I knew was falling apart brick by brick. Something inside me broke that night. I didn't let my emotions out when I got home. I couldn't. I needed to think. I needed to regain control of myself. The betrayal was too close to deal with. I spent days making plans, seething with rage. I wanted them to feel what I felt. I wanted them to feel the power of what they had destroyed. The time came sooner than I expected. I waited, and when I found them again, this time in my house, I did something. I burst into the room, and the look of fear on their faces is forever etched in my memory. David was paralyzed. Laura screamed and backed away. In one hand, I held a baseball bat, and in the other, a modified, non-lethal gun loaded with pepper spray cartridges. I didn't want to kill them. I just wanted to be the boss. They were hysterical, but I wasn't. I didn't yell or get angry. I was cold. I was calm. I sat them down. I played them the recording. I showed them all the evidence I had, told them when and how I found it. They couldn't argue. I threatened them directly. If any of them tried to get revenge or pin it on me, the recordings would be made public, to their families, their friends, their communities. I wanted to disgrace them. The room fell silent. After that night, everything went downhill. Rumors started, maybe not about the recordings themselves, but a lot of rumors and speculation. Her self-confidence disappeared. She started skipping work. Her friends turned their backs on her. Depression gripped her, and no excuses could free her. We grew apart. She was allowed to stay in the house, but it was like a tomb, not a home. Her career stalled, and she eventually lost her job. David was no luckier. His own betrayal destroyed his marriage. He tried to walk on water at work, but one man can't sustain himself on charm alone for long. Scandals followed him everywhere. He wasn't even offered a promotion or invited to meetings. Eventually, he was fired. Months passed, and I found myself standing in front of David again. This time, I wasn't as nervous. I offered him a simple deal, $1 million for his silence. No lawsuits, no threats, just a simple deal. He knew I had the evidence. He knew he had lost. He paid. With that money, I started my life over. I moved away and started from scratch. A few years later, I got married for the second time. My second wife lit a fire in me that I never thought I would see again. And then, a few years later, the phone rang. Laura had died. Illness after many years of mental and emotional breakdown. She faded away, lonely, weak, forgotten. I didn't cry. But I wasn't happy either. Just emptiness. That evening, I sat alone, living the life we had created. The woman I loved, not the woman she had become. I remembered her laughter, the way she hummed while cooking dinner, the adoration in her eyes when she looked at me as if I were her whole world. Somewhere along the way, somewhere on that path, that world collapsed. And I moved on, but after that, I was never the same. The lie changed us both forever, and after it, all that remained was the bitter taste of unfulfilled promises. After Laura's death, I found myself once again surrounded by memories that I had pushed away for decades. The pain in my heart, the anger, the betrayal, all of that had probably been weighing on me all these years, but now it came back with sour clarity, not to torment me, but to tell me that the past would not let me go. Even when I was myself, even when I changed and led a different life, there was still something inside me that was kept in that place. I couldn't leave. I talked myself out of it. But in reality, I didn't believe I could. Watching her being buried would have been too real, too final. However, I learned from a mutual friend that the funeral was quiet. A few friends and family members came to say goodbye. David wasn't there either. Guilt or self-preservation, I'll never know. Or maybe he was nothing more than a character in a novel, helping to wear out the tapestry. A few weeks passed, and I received a letter. It was from Laura's cousin, a young woman I had probably only met once or twice. She wrote that in her last days, Laura had talked about me constantly, that in the final period of her life, she had been torn apart by guilt, that she had said things she wanted to erase and take with her, that she regretted saying, that she had done something she could never undo. Her cousin explained that she had a small box with a brass latch on her dresser, and inside was a photograph of the two of us from our honeymoon in Santorini. She had signed it. For what we had, and for what I destroyed. I'm sorry. I loved you. I read those words for hours. They didn't calm me down, but they helped me understand. There was love. Real love. The kind you can't change. And I believe that was the greatest tragedy of it all. She loved me. I loved her. And for some reason, it all fell apart. I always believed that betrayal was the worst thing that could happen. Now I've come to the conclusion that what's left is regret. Regret about what happened between us. Regret that we couldn't hold on to what we had. That evening, I sat alone in my office with that photo and let the memories flood back. Not memories of the high points, not of the espionage, the arguments, the scandals, but of the beginning, of the laughter, of the late nights when we cooked dinner together, of how she would snuggle up to me when we sat watching old black and white movies. That's what I've kept in my memory, the ones I didn't let all this tarnish. Life went on. My new wife, Emily, was a different woman than Laura. Maybe even better. She was well-balanced, attentive, and, most importantly, honest. We built something solid, simple but lasting. I never told her the truth about Laura. There are things that should remain in the past, and there are demons that should not be spoken of. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I find myself drawn to that photograph again. Not out of desire, but out of memory. Because despite everything, Laura was mine. She made me who I was, out of love, of course, but not for all of it, not for the pain, the loss, the bitter lessons that only betrayal can teach. I never had a happy ending. But I had a second chance. And in a way, maybe that was enough. In the end, we were both broken. We both did things we could never take back. But in the empty space where the wreckage had been, in the space where the broken pieces and temporary faith lay, there was something that had once existed. And for me, that reality, painful as it was the only closure I could find. In the days following Laura's death, I remembered things I had tried to bury deep inside myself for 40 years. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, they had softened over the years, but now they clung to me with bitter precision, not to haunt me, but to remind me that the past never lets you go. I had fought so hard to leave everything behind, to start over, to build a new life, and yet there was still a taste of the past lingering inside me. I didn't go to her funeral. I talked myself out of it. The truth is, I didn't know I could. Seeing her buried would have made it real, official. But a mutual friend said it was quiet. No big ceremony, just estranged relatives and old friends who stopped by to say goodbye. David didn't show up either. Selfishness or guilt, I'll never know. Maybe he couldn't believe that the chapter he had worked so hard to destroy was finally over. I spoke to one of Laura's cousins, a woman I had met once or twice. A few weeks later, she wrote to me. She said that in the last months of her life, Laura had talked about me a lot and very loudly. That in her final months, she was full of remorse. She told him that there were things she regretted, that she had done things she could never take back. My cousin mentioned that Laura had a small box with a brass lock on her dresser with a single photograph of the two of us on our honeymoon in Santorini. On the back, she had written, "For what we had and for what I destroyed. I'm sorry. I loved you." I sat there staring at those words for what seemed like hours. They didn't comfort me, but they made sense. Once there was love, real love, the kind that only happens once in a lifetime. And perhaps that was the tragedy of it all. She loved me. I loved her. And yet, for some reason, it didn't work out. I used to believe that betrayal was the most painful thing. But then I realized that it's regret that causes pain. Regret for what we lost. Regret for what slipped through our fingers. Regret that we weren't strong enough to hold on to what once meant everything to me. I spent the night with that photo, alone in my library, letting the memories wash over me. Not the memories of the fall, the fights, the struggles, the madness, but the ones that came before. The laughter, the late breakfasts, the way she would rest her head on my shoulder when we sat up late watching old movies. Those were the memories I clung to, the ones that seemed untouched by all the mess that followed. Things were going much better. My new wife, Emily, was as different from Laura as two people could be, and maybe that was for the best. She was unassuming, refined, and above all, honest. We built something good, something unpretentious, but something that would last. I never shared everything about Laura with her. There are things you have to let go of. Ghosts you don't even need to talk about. And yet, at midnight, when all is quiet, I find myself holding that photo. Not because I miss her, but because I remember. Because in everything that happened, Laura was a part of me. She defined me, not with love, not with pain, not with loss, but only with the lessons that betrayal can teach. I never got my fairy tale, but I got a second chance. And in a way, in some sick, twisted way, that was enough. We both came with broken hearts. We both committed a sin we couldn't fix. But beneath the broken hearts, beneath the sin, beneath the shards of broken trust, there was something real. And for me, that something, as painful as it was the only ultimatum I'd ever had to make. In the weeks after Laura's death, I retreated into memories I had suppressed for many years before. The pain, the rage, the betrayal, it had all dulled over the years, but now it was back in my hands with a bitter, sharp clarity, not to play with me, but to force the past to remember itself as fiercely as it had fought. Even after I had long since died, even after I was happy in my new life, I still clung to that book. I didn't go to her funeral. I reminded her that I didn't have to. But the thing is, I didn't believe I could. Her funeral would have been too real, too final. But I heard from a mutual friend that it was a modest farewell, not a hero's farewell, but a parting of estranged relatives and old classmates. David didn't come. Guilt or self-preservation? I'll never know. Perhaps he too couldn't bear the loss of the book he had helped desecrate. A few weeks later, I received a letter. It was from one of Laura's cousins, a girl I had spoken to only a few times and very briefly. She told me that in Laura's last months she had talked about me all the time, that in those last months she seemed tormented by remorse. She told me how she had said things she didn't want to say and done things she couldn't take back. Laura's cousin described how Laura had a small box with a brass latch on her dresser, and inside was the only photograph of the two of us, our wedding in Santorini. On the back, she had signed her name. For what we were, and for what I destroyed. I'm sorry. I loved you. I read those words for a long time. They were painful to me, but they left no room for doubt. There was love, real love, the kind that never comes twice. And perhaps that was the greatest tragedy of it all. She loved me, and I loved her. And somehow, somewhere, it all fell apart. I used to believe that betrayal was the worst thing that could happen. But now I realize that what really remains is regret. Regret that we lost what we had. Regret that we never fought for what meant everything to both of us. One day, I was at home, alone in my office with that photo, and I let the memories wash over me. Not memories of the fall, the detective work, the chaos, the arguments, but of the beginning. About how she laughed, about the late dinners we cooked together, about how she would snuggle up to me and watch movies. Those were the things I clung to. The things I didn't allow myself to remember were drowned out by all the garbage that came after. Life went on. My new wife, Emily, wasn't Laura, and maybe that was for the best. She was good and honest, and above all, honest. We built something honest, something quiet, but real. I never mentioned the whole story with Laura to her. There are ghosts from the past, and there are ghosts that don't need to be talked about. But in strange moments when darkness falls, I take my hand and press it against the photograph. Not because I miss her, but because I remember. Because despite everything, Laura had a place in my heart. She made me who I am today, not so much with love as with pain, loss, and the bitter lessons we learn through betrayal. I never found happiness, but I got a second chance. And in some strange way, somehow, that was enough. In the end, we both got hurt. We both said things we can't take back. But through all the destruction, through all the mistakes and lost trust, there was something real for a moment. And for me, that reality, beyond the pain, was the only ending I could see.